Hello, my name's David Chaput de Saintonge. I'm a physician and a teacher, and I work mainly in Eastern Europe. And I'd like to introduce you to a model of medical care. It's called the 7-level model, and you'll see why in just a moment. First of all, I'd like you to look at this picture. I was walking in France one day in the country, and I saw this apparition at the window, so I waved to her, but she didn't wave back. And the reason is, of course, that she's not real, she's a model. And what I'm going to show you now is just a model of medical care, and it will be abbreviated in many senses. But we have found that this model works well and represents reality well. So I'd like you to see a patient with me. We're going to Belgrade, and it's about 7 years ago, and it's a cold, dark day. And we walk along the streets into this block of flats, and I've been asked to see somebody living on the top floor. And we climb up the stairs, and it's dark, and there's a slight smell of urine. And sitting on the stairs, there's a young man smoking cigarettes and stubbing them out in a little pot. And I go into the room, and I open the door, and there's the patient. He's about 50 years old, and he's very bedraggled and pale. He's slightly sweaty, and he's in a dirty white t-shirt hanging off him. He's very thin. He's lost a lot of weight. He's lying on the bed in the sitting room. And as I come in, he does his best to raise himself up in the bed to greet me. And around him are his family, looking very nervous, very anxious, and then look to me as I come into the door. And they tell me this story, and the story is that about 18 months ago he'd had a cancer removed from his kidney, and they told him it was successfully removed, and he was well for about 9 months, and then things started to go wrong. He began to get cough and breathlessness, increasingly breathless on exertion. That's the first level of the model. You see, our patients don't come to us with diseases, they come with symptoms and with problems. And one difficulty in the education of doctors in many countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, is they know a lot about diseases, but not very much about how to solve patients' problems. And this model is intended to help. So, the level of symptoms. Now, I examined him, and he had a fever. He had an increased respiratory rate and was clearly not well. This is the second level. This is the level of signs. Now, a sign means something that points. They are pointing to what is happening underneath. They're pointing to the causes. He brought his chest x-ray with him, and this showed many rounded masses, rounded opacities in his chest. This is the level of disorders of structure and function. There's a clear disorder of structure here. What do we think is going on? What's the pathology? Well, maybe he had a pneumonia. My guess was that he had secondary cancer, secondary to the primary in his kidney. And that's the level of pathology. What about the causes? Well, he was certainly a smoker, but the most likely thing was, I think, that he had secondaries. And this is the level of causes. These are 5 levels at which the disease expresses itself. The disease shows itself. Now, when I was a student, well, that was the end of the matter, basically. Now it's treatment, isn't it? However, it's not the end of the matter. You see, he was clearly unable to work. He was actually unable to dress himself. He could barely rise from the bed. This is the level of disabilities. But there's more than that. Around his bed were his family, anxious, worried, concerned that he was going to die. She was going to lose her husband. They were going to lose the breadwinner in the family. And this is the level of social effects. These are the 7 levels of the 7-level model, the levels at which a disease shows itself. You see, a diagnosis isn't just a label stuck on the forehead like hypertension. A diagnosis is what is going on here. Being able to understand and describe what is happening here, what is this all about? So those are the 7 levels. And you see the process is a little bit like drilling for oil, isn't it? You can appreciate quite easily what the patient's telling you, the symptoms, the signs, but then after that you rely on x-rays, on shadows, on some pathology, microscopy maybe, and you're, if you like, drilling down to where the oil is. The oil is the causes, because it is those that you aim to prevent, it is those that you aim to treat, it's those you aim to work with where possible. So I've talked about the diagnostic side of the model, running through the diagnosis. The other side to the model is about treatment. At each of these 7 levels, or most of them, there should be some sort of planned therapeutic intervention. So the most important one, in one sense, is preventing the causes. You may not be able to do that, and certainly in his case, we couldn't do that. There's no way we could have prevented the causes of his cancer and his secondaries from acting now. Other interventions to reverse the progression of the disease and have it regress. Maybe you can't do that, or you'll be only partially successful. Relieve symptoms. I have to say that the standard of symptom care, symptomatic relief, is often extremely poor, particularly in Eastern Europe. Limit the disability and rehabilitate the patient where possible. So what I'm saying to you is that this is a multidisciplinary set of interventions. The primary care physician won't be able to do all these things, and he or she will require the help of other members of the healthcare team. But that wasn't all. I said that he had a cough and was breathless. Something else. He was very dizzy, and he had tingling in his fingers. His respiratory rate was considerably increased, and he had this tingling all the time, and he said he felt dizzy. So what do you think was happening? What do you think that might have been? Breathing away, fingers feeling quite stiff. I can't keep this up very long, but I thought that he had, clearly on observation, he had an increased respiratory rate, and underneath that, I thought he had a hyperventilation syndrome. He was hyperventilating. That was the disorder of function. What about the pathology? Well, I thought that he had an anxiety state. And why did he have an anxiety state? Well, he was clearly afraid that his cancer had returned. And I'm afraid he was right. You see, it's just not a question of making a physical diagnosis. Lots of physical things happening as well. But another part of this patient is involved, and that's his mind. It's not enough to concentrate on the physical dimension. There's a spiritual dimension as well. A psychological dimension as well. What's the importance of that? Why should we worry about that? Well, anxious patients suffer more frequent and more severe pain than those who aren't anxious. So it's important to manage their anxiety, to treat their anxiety. Otherwise, their analgesic requirements will be significantly increased. Take a look at this. It wouldn't have been ethical for me to photograph my patient, but he looked like this. This is a picture of an Afghani man with his dying son. I want you just to look at him for a moment. Look at his eyes. What do you see there? What questions is he asking? What's going through his mind? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my son? What has my son done to deserve this? What hope is there for me? What hope is there for my country? These are the words that my patient spoke when I tried to explain to him what was happening. He said, "So I'm finished then." You might be thinking about therapeutic interventions at a physical level, maybe therapeutic interventions at a psychological level. This is another level still, isn't it? We've talked about body, talked about mind. There's another place where hopelessness and despair live, which you saw on the face of that Afghani man and his dying son. And that's the place of the spirit. Spirituality, the spirit, requires a little bit of definition. Here is a definition. So a relationship of trust in God or the universe, the cosmos, the ultimate being, whatever it is, which provides a basis for hope and meaning in our lives. I wanted to show you this because some people think that spirituality is just sort of like church business, like it belongs somewhere else. That's actually not true. This is the WHO Quality of Life instrument, and this wasn't invented by the Pope. This was invented by social scientists, and you see 6 levels here, 6 dimensions of life quality: physical health, psychological health, independence, social relationships, environment, and spirituality, and religion, personal beliefs. I just want to take a look at those a moment, because there's several elements to this. And the first one is called Transcendence, and that's our feeling of connectedness to a spiritual being or a spiritual force. It has to do with what life's about, what meaning we attribute to life. It has to do with wholeness. It has to do with integration. It has to do with purpose. It has to do with inner strength. It has to do with what we think about death and dying and the love of God. Here are 2 Serbian women, 3 Serbian women, talking over the fence. So what do you think they're talking about? Something good? Something bad? I love this bit of body language, don't you? This is another dimension concerned with personal relationships. Selflessness, the importance of being able to be selfless, accepting others, and giving and receiving forgiveness. These are really important in our lives. Other bits to the spiritual dimension? Well, a freedom to practice beliefs and rituals, important, faithfulness, and maybe specific religious beliefs and specific religious practices. I'd like to show you something really interesting. This is a study looking at the impact of hopelessness. Hopelessness is a spiritual issue, and I'd like you to just take a look at the impact of hopelessness on death. And we're looking here at a study of Finnish men who, at the beginning of the study, had no evidence of, hadn't had a myocardial infarction, had no evidence of cancer. And their level of hopelessness in terms of their expressed level of control over the future was measured. Then they were followed for about 6 years, and these are the results. Now you see that low levels of hopelessness were associated with a significantly smaller rate of myocardial infarction. That's new myocardial infarctions. About 4 times less, and same with cancer. The effect not quite so big, but a highly significant reduction in the rate of new cancers, the occurrence of new cancers. So this means that having hope protects you from physical disease. In one sense, this is what you'd expect if you believe that human beings work as a whole, that our body, mind, and spirit work together. They're indissoluble. I've kind of teased them apart to suggest they're 3 dimensions, a body, mind, and spirit. But it's not like that. Human beings aren't made like that. We're made as one. We're made as wholes. Everything works together. Let me show you something else. This is looking at patients with cancer, and they're asked a couple of questions about their religious beliefs, and some of them said that they believed in God, and the support which their religious beliefs had given to them when they were ill. And some patients said they had good support, and others none at all. Now, those who had a high score on both those 2 questions had a significantly reduced mortality. So your belief, your faith in God actually reduces your mortality from cancer, existing cancers. So I could say faith is good for your health. It's good for more than that, of course. I'd like you to look at this study. This was a study done in America, and it appeared that 3/4 of patients actually wanted the doctor to consider their spiritual needs. They wanted that to be part of his agenda, but when you looked at the doctors, most of them never or rarely actually discussed the patient's spiritual needs with them. So you've got a mismatch between what the patients want and what the doctors are prepared to do. So there's a problem. But that's America. What is it like where you work? What is it like in your country? Is spiritual care part of the physician's business, do you think? I'm going to leave that question with you.